literally makes my blood boil. I don't know how you maintained your cool sitting across from that. I would have.
Because I knew I was getting under his skin.
Hello, team, and welcome to Bureaucracy. I'm your host, Emily Gross, and I'm very excited because I have Spencer Kuvin with me, who's the Chief Legal Officer at Gold Law. He's an attorney in Florida. He represented some of Jeffrey Epstein's victims. So we're going to be talking all about why Jeffrey Epstein is back in the news and what's been going on and the craziness that has been following. So Spencer, thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. And it is a lot of craziness, that's for sure.
So much craziness. So before we get started, what are we drinking?
Well, I was drinking water until I finished it.
Good for you. Hydration is important. We support that on the podcast. I have a emergency because I have a sinus infection that I am currently losing the battle against. So cheers to that.
Cheers to that.
So before we get started, the question I always love to ask my guests is, why should we trust what you have to say?
Good question, I think. So I have represented victims of Jeffrey Epstein, now 9 total. I represented the first victim that ever went to police and actually sat down with the investigating officers to build the case against Epstein originally here in Palm Beach County with that young girl who was 14 years old. That was back in 2007. And worked with the investigators to build that case, helped walk her through the criminal investigation and then subsequently the civil investigation that took place, and then represented 3 more victims after her locally. And I have taken the deposition of Jeffrey Epstein multiple times. I've sat through mediations with Jeffrey multiple times. And I've seen all the evidence that there is to see in the civil cases that has come about over the years.
Yeah. So I'm very thrilled to have you on. Truly. Everyone's been talking all about like releasing the files and whatnot, and I think it's really important. However, I feel like it's gotten to this crazy political tornado and people aren't focusing on the victims. So before we begin, how are your clients doing?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, and I appreciate that. The victims I represented were 14 years old at the time. So that puts them now into their 30s. And they have had to live with the stigma of this issue for essentially their entire adult lives. Every time that this comes up in the media and in the press, it just reopens that old wound that exists from back in their childhood. And it's traumatizing, and it will be, unfortunately, for the rest of their lives. The thing that people don't understand, I think, is that there are groups of victims, some that are comfortable coming out and talking, and I praise, their strength, and that's great. Ms. Farmer comes out and talks frequently about her experience with Epstein, and we know that Ms. Giuffre, before her death, was very outspoken about her time with Jeffrey. But there are numerous victims that still are unnamed. All of the clients I represented originally were anonymous and have chosen to remain so for the rest of their lives. And some of those victims have even kept the information that they were attached to this case from their husbands. And they have some, gone on with their lives and wish to put this entirely behind them and don't ever want to think of this man again for the rest of their lives. So, it's tough on them when it keeps coming up in the news.
Yeah, I can only imagine how traumatic that is. So I'm truly hoping people recognize that this should be a victim-centric conversation in the news and the media, and recognizing that it's really, fun and games for people to talk about the conspiracies and the big picture and stuff like that. But when it comes down to it, these are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of women whose lives were impacted because of this person. And we can't forget that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're talking about women now that are married and have children, and imagine having a daughter and having this in your past and knowing the things that can happen, unfortunately, to small girls, young girls. It makes you overly protective, hyper protective of your own children. And that can affect, not only your own life, but the lives of your children, future.
Yeah, it's so upsetting. He's such a fucking asshole. Sorry.
Yes, I would agree with that.
Yeah, putting that out there. You mentioned that you've interacted with him, right? Before he killed himself or was killed,
I just say before he died in jail.
I think that's probably good. It's probably a good neutral way of putting that. Um, was there any remorse when you were saying?
No, none at all. In fact, he tried to convince me during one of the mediations that everything he did was perfectly normal and that in other countries, girls at the age of 13 can consent to whatever they want. And why are people coming after him like he's some bad guy? These girls wanted it. And so what if they were young? They enjoyed it and had a great time and got paid for it. That was his position. And I would tell you that Ghislaine Maxwell, who now is sitting behind bars and hopefully stays there for a very long time, thinks the exact same way he does.
Wow.
Yep. They could care less about the effect that they've had on these girls and essentially considered them trash and really had absolutely zero empathy. You're talking about a serial narcissistic sociopath.
Literally makes my blood boil. I don't know how you maintained your cool sitting across from that. I would have.
Because I knew I was getting under his skin.
And that's good. Thank you for the work you did. Truly.
The goal was to really just annoy him to the point where he could say something hopefully really stupid. And to make him so mad at me that he would speak out and say something that I could use against him later. I would tell you this, and this, I don't know if this is even public knowledge, but after the deposition I took of him, which is now on YouTube for everyone to see, that he terminated, he filed a Florida bar complaint against me trying to go after my bar license because he was so upset.
Seriously? Oh, what a sore
Yeah, it didn't go anywhere, obviously.
Yeah, no.
The Florida bar summarily dismissed it, but yeah, I had to deal with that.
Wow. So he really tried to do everything besides being held accountable.
Oh, yeah.
And the first kind of time this was brought up in civilly and legally, it was like a sham agreement, right? And he was only in prison for like a year and a half.
Yeah. So the history of that was, he was originally, all the evidence came out, and originally the state attorney's office dropped the ball because you have two levels of prosecutors. You have state prosecutors, that's the state of Florida, and you have a state attorney who can prosecute any crimes that occur within the jurisdiction of that state. So Palm Beach County, for example. You then have federal prosecutors. That's a whole different division of prosecutors for the U.S. government. So originally he was supposed to be prosecuted by the state, but the state attorney dropped the ball and decided not to prosecute him. Now, mind you, he's seen all the evidence. He had all of these victims, and for some unknown reason, the state attorney chose not to prosecute. Well, the town of Palm Beach and the chief of police at the time was so upset that he wrote an open letter that I have to the state attorney basically saying, "What are you doing? I can't believe you're not prosecuting this. This is awful." At that point, he then turned everything he had over to the FBI and asked them to prosecute and to investigate. And that's when the FBI then conducted their investigation and uncovered 40 potential victims on their own and decided that they were then going to have these secret discussions to come to a plea agreement. And Alex Acosta at the time was the U.S. attorney for the Southern District of Florida. And he had secret meetings with Lefkowitz, who was Mr. Epstein's attorney at the time. And these are meetings that are well documented now because of litigation that occurred later. And he had these meetings at restaurants and bars and whatever, and they concocted this sweetheart deal that basically allowed Epstein to walk during the day and go to his office during the day and just basically sleep at jail during the night.
Has there been anything come out about why Alex Acosta was okay with that?
Nobody knows why he entered such a crappy deal. I mean, it was unbelievable. But what I can tell you is that he got rewarded for it later, because years later he got appointed by the president to the cabinet. Our current president, during his initial term, appointed Alex Acosta as a secretary on the cabinet to the White House until it came out that he had been a part of this sweetheart deal. And then he resigned.
Interesting. Very interesting. So let's talk about this kind of backroom dealings, because it's been a pretty big part of the news recently as well. You've seen a lot of evidence. There's a lot of conspiracies about, files and lists and all that stuff. Can you speak to any of that?
So during the litigation, we never saw any quote unquote list of potential Johns that were utilizing the services of Epstein's sex trafficking. But what did exist were phone books, message pads. We had all of those because they were seized during the police officers going into the home and seizing all the records and information. So we did have that information at the time during the investigation. And what those revealed were that people would call when they were in town and talk to Ghislaine and say, hey, look, I'm in town. Can you send over a girl? And that's the way it operated. So, is there a list? No, I don't think Epstein or Ghislaine Maxwell ever created any kind of a list, but there are a number of individuals who I'm sure that the FBI is aware of through the calls that were made and the witnesses they interviewed that were utilizing the services of Epstein and Maxwell. And so if there is a list, it was probably created by the FBI. So I'd like to see the list they created.
What are your thoughts on, all of this being back in the news and, kind of I think it's the deputy of the DOJ going and having a meeting with Ghislaine in a very secretive way, and a potential pardon being on the table?
It's back in the news because Trump. He created this own situation for himself. If he had just shut up and not talked about anything regarding Epstein during the campaign trail, this would have been a non-issue. But it's a self-inflicted wound, right? He brought the issue up during the campaign trail, and now he's having to pay the price for all the promises that he made to his followers with respect to releasing the information. So, he's only got himself to blame for the problem he's got. Now, look, as to the conversations that the DOJ had with Maxwell, it just smells bad, right? This is Trump's prior personal criminal defense attorney having a conversation with Maxwell. Why? Why is he having private conversations? There's no need for that. The only thing that the victims want is for him to sign an executive order, the president, and release all this information immediately. Release it all, everything, lock, stock, and barrel, delete the names of the minor victims, and put everything else out there.
What do you think needs to be released? What do you think is hiding in a way?
Look, they're going to probably release the grand jury testimony.
I've heard that's kind of like there's not going to be very much in there.
There's 4 victims that are mentioned in the grand jury testimony, and none of the victims testified. They didn't call any of them to testify. So you're not going to hear from any of them. There were 2 police officers, FBI agents, that testified. That's all you're going to see. And it only details 4 victims. Again, there were at least 40 victims that the FBI investigated, and we know of hundreds of other victims that are out there. The FBI has the information on hundreds of victims. That's what should be released. Releasing a small crumb from an entire tray of cookies, it doesn't cut it. Give us it all. Give all the information out.
So you're saying they have all the call records. They have all the books.
They have everything. Yeah. Hey, listen, we know that they have, because they've told the public, based upon requests that have been made in the past under the Freedom of Information Act, that they have over 300 gigabytes of information, 300 gigabytes of data and information, and 1,000+ hours of video from inside of Epstein's homes, because he had surveillance systems in every single home and he was recording. Where's the video? Let's see it. We know it exists. Blur the victims' faces and release the video. Let's see who was there, who showed up at these parties, who attended these events, and who was involved.
Yeah. Do you think that would bring comfort to your victims, to the people that you represent?
They've always wanted justice, right? They want accountability and justice. some measure of justice, because the system failed them on every step of the way, right? The system failed them by failing to prosecute them from a state level. The system failed them by not prosecuting him federally. The system failed them by agreeing to a sweetheart deal with immunity for him. The system failed the victims again by allowing him to die in jail. The only measure of justice was that Ghislaine was prosecuted.
20 years does not feel like enough time.
It really doesn't. But again, they only prosecuted a few cases, right? They only selected a few cases and prosecuted those. So she was convicted and sentenced based on that. Should have been more.
It doesn't smell good.
Nope.
It smells like a cover-up. Sure does.
Kind of does. I mean, look, I keep telling people if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck.
Yeah. And you know what I find so interesting? It's like you see liberals and conservatives fighting about it for different reasons online, right? And there's a lot of conservatives that are like, well, Bill Clinton's probably there. And we're like, okay. Release it. No one, everyone wants everyone to be held accountable. There is no picking or choosing who we want to be on that list or not be on that list. Everyone who partook in this should be held accountable.
100%. This crosses party lines. Look, I was on Newsmax last night, and I said the same exact thing. This all happened during the George Bush administration, okay? You then went through Obama and Biden, Trump 1, and Trump 2. None of them released it. I don't care if you're a Democrat or a Republican. They all failed. All of them. To release the information that should have been released. And and anyone that's on those videos, anyone that's on the documents that are existing, they should all be held accountable. I don't care who they are or what party they belong to.
Is there any reason why you've hypothesized why they may not have been a priority for the past administrations?
You know, look, unless there's a reason to prosecute, right? Unless there's enough evidence to prosecute, then I can understand why it kind of got dropped to the bottom of the barrel. And if you've got a suspect that's deceased and another one that's in jail, you're not really looking very hard anymore. You know, you stick that box at the bottom and you go, we just hope everybody forgets about this.
Got it. That makes sense. I'm not saying it's right, but I can understand that rationale.
Yeah. And also, look, you know, you've got evidence, I'm sure, of inappropriate activity, but the government would have to prove criminal activity in order to prosecute beyond a reasonable doubt. So while somebody may end up on a video, even end up on a video having sex with someone who might be a minor, there are all kinds of legal reasons why it may be non-prosecutable. If you don't have the victim that's willing to corroborate it, or the victim's not alive anymore, or you know, you can't identify exactly who that person is on the video. It's a very high standard that the government has to prosecute. So if they can't meet that burden, I can understand why they would say, look, it's bad, it looks bad, but we really likely wouldn't be able to convict. But that's not a reason to not release it and let the public judge it.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. It's, you know, people that are like surprised or shocked about wealthy men being part of this. And I was like, I'm sorry. Have you met a middle-aged wealthy dude recently? I was like, they're all kind of creepy. Not you. You're lovely. But I'm like,
please don't throw me in with general middle-aged wealthy men.
You're not. You're fine. I'm just saying. So like, you know, the people who think really high of themselves, who have like a big old ego, who are, I mean, I remember being like, I'm 27 now. And like getting attention when I was like 15, 16, 17 for people in their 30s. And I look back now and I'm like, you're repulsive. It's disgusting, you know, and hopefully this will change a lot of, I mean, it's not going to because society sucks, but you know, like change a lot of the behavior and a lot of just the kind of like pushed aside way we deal with men these days, you know,
it's accountability. It's about accountability. If people know that they're going to be held accountable, they act accordingly.
Yes.
If they think that they're untouchable, then they act that way.
Right.
And they act on their base instincts, be they good or bad, because they don't think that anyone is ever going to catch them or hold them accountable.
Right. And we need to stop doing the stereotype and the trope of middle-aged men liking young women, because it does not help any of this at all. And it perpetuates this creepiness, and it perpetuates this, terrible things that happen. And it's not okay. It's
frustrating, but I don't know that society's ever going to change that much.
No, but if anyone feels uncomfortable by any man, you call me and I'll come bite them. And then Spencer, I may need you as my lawyer for that.
I would advise against biting anyone.
That's correct. Yes. No, I understand. Thank you for your legal advice.
Unless they ask first.
Exactly. Yes. Important. Very important.
Yes.
Is there anything else you would like to touch on?
No, I mean, look, one of the biggest issues I have at this point is that our president has promised he would release this information. He promised it on the campaign trail. He promised it again once he was elected. All he has to do is sign an executive order today. That's it. Just sign an executive order telling the DOJ to release this information immediately, and it would get released. So what are we waiting for? Why is he messing around and letting the DOJ talk about releasing dribs and drabs of information? Put pen to paper, hold up your promise, and sign the order and get it out.
And we know he has no problem signing executive orders. So.
No, he signs them left and right for everything.
Well, it's been lovely to have you on. Please, if you communicate with your victims, the people you represent, I don't want to say victim because they're like, they're more than that. But the people you represent, let them know there are a lot of people out here that really care for their well-being and are sending a lot of, thoughts and healing vibes towards their way.
Appreciate it.
But appreciate having you on. So thank you.
Thanks for having me.
And I'm your host, Emily Gross. We'll be back next week with another episode of Bureaucracy.